Welcome to our podcast, Where Do We Go? Where we bring in guests to have conversations with high schoolers that are both relatable and informative regarding the idea of female leadership. I'm Kylie, and I'm the founder of the organization and club, WeGo, and I'm so glad that you decided to listen to our podcast today. WeGo stands for Women Empowerment and Global Opportunity, and our mission is to cultivate the skill set students will need in order to foster a new generation of strong leaders that will make changes in the field that they want to take on.
And I'm the founder of WeGo. And today I'm joined by Miss Clare Connors, who will introduce herself in a moment, but she is the current Attorney General of Hawaii since 2019. So I'll let her introduce herself now.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kylie. Yes, I am presently the Attorney General for the state of Hawaii. I am also a Punahou 1992 grad. That is a really long time ago now that I say it out loud. But it's been quite a path since I left Punahou as a student. Of course, I've remained very attached to Punahou. My two children are there. It's a wonderful institution and continues to do great things. As the Attorney General for the state, I am the Chief Legal Officer and also the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for the state. So that means I have over 700 employees that work for the department that I oversee. It's the largest law firm in the state, if that's any measure. I also serve in the governor's cabinet, but not just do I have an executive role by serving in the cabinet, I also advise the legislature, and sometimes we also defend or take cases that involve the judiciary. So it's a very unique role in that I work across all three branches of government. That's not always how it works. Sometimes you find yourself in one branch, but I also advise the agencies. That's part of my executive function, along with working with all the attorneys and all the employees in our department to help provide good advice to our legislators and to all those involved in government on the state level. So as the Attorney General, I'm a lawyer, I'm a litigator, I'm a public advocate, and also an executive. I think that's at least as many hats as I can think of at this moment.
Yeah, so I think that's just a good way to, let some of our viewers know, because they may not know exactly what the responsibility as the Attorney General is and like what that job entails. So I think that gives some nice background on what you do and what's your responsibility. But we do have a question that we always ask our guests, and so basically we want to know, who are some of the women in your life that you admire?
That's a great question. There are many of them. We always start with the women who shaped us in our personal lives, and that would certainly be my mother. She is a force to be reckoned with, and she raised four kids and did so while working a number of jobs, but always set for us a very high standard, not by telling us what to do or keeping at us in a naggy fashion day after day, but by setting an example. And she is someone who's continued to to teach me lessons even now. And as someone who's helping me raise my own children and continue to provide advice to me as we move forward in life together, she's definitely one of the most impactful persons. Then when I was at Yale, my first year, so I went to Yale after leaving Punahou. It was the 1992 election, and that was the time when Hillary Clinton was running with her husband, I'll say, even though it was Bill Clinton that was running, it's a team effort. And I met her for the first time. I was in my first week of law, my first week of college. I wasn't so akamai about the politics. I obviously knew who was running, but I didn't go to events on campus. But somebody said, "Hey, there's going to be a rally on New Haven Green," and I went out there and just was listening and was very inspired by what she was saying, and ended up finding myself all of a sudden in a place where I was shaking her hand and meeting her. And I mentioned that because a few years later, many years later, when I had my daughter was listening to Hillary Clinton's acceptance of at the DNC of the nomination, a historic moment. And my daughter was little, and she just heard in the words and the substance and the reflections on Hillary Clinton's own mother something very powerful that that she reacted to in a way that I understood. So that was somebody who early on had an impact. She is a lawyer as well, a public servant, and has done a lot of very interesting things, I think, as a career public servant. There are so many examples. Kamala Harris now is a wonderful example. She's someone who's got a very similar background to mine. She was an attorney general. She was a prosecutor. Before I became attorney general, I was also a federal prosecutor, and that was meant I had a lot of court time as well. So I was a litigator. But she's obviously somebody who has so much to bring to the table, and there's a lot that we can learn from her, not just in the example she sets as a leader, but somebody who really has been working on a large scale uh, program for many years, and it's just wonderful to see how it all came to fruition. So those would be three women
Yeah,
examples.
I totally agree too. I think those are, and even like my own mother too. Like I could say the same thing with my own mother and what she's taught me in my life. But I think what I would like to kind of veer over now is towards kind of like your journey and maybe some of the messages that you might have towards girls that are also interested in the same field that you are in. And so I think one of the main questions is, what are like the difficulties that you think women face in the journey leading up to becoming a lawyer or holding a prestigious public position?
Great. So that's a great question, and I'll address it in a couple of ways. And end by talking, I think, a little bit about how women, especially in leadership, are different than men, and how that's
Mhm.
okay. And it's something we need to embrace and be very comfortable with, but we need to recognize, because clearly there's a lot that we need to do. So as I said, I left Hawaii to go to college, and then I worked for 3 years following college in New York City. And at that time, the mayor was a man, and the boss that I worked for was a man. But I got to see early on different examples of women in leadership, and I got to be a part of actually working to bring more women into leadership. So when I was working in New York City, I was young. I was right out of college, so I was about 22 years old, and I was working in the parks department. So it was largely a male-focused type of
Mhm.
job with the type of work we had done. We did, but there were clear examples of women who were standing out as managers, who were standing out with certain levels of expertise. And yet, at a young age, got confronted with some of the barriers that they faced. And even though my boss, my direct boss, had two daughters, and really, I think, thought of himself as very pro women advancement, there was one instance where a woman who was running our one of our divisions, really smart woman. Anytime she'd be in a meeting with all the borough commissioners and anyone, she just had her facts down. She was leading this incredible program. She was doing it without any fanfare. She was up for a promotion, a big promotion, and I had suggested her name. I thought, just based on work ethic, based on what she had produced, this would be great. The commissioner said, "Good, go have lunch with her, see what she's interested in." And I did. And as we were eating, she said, "This is wonderful. I'm so excited that I'm being thought about for this job." She says, "I don't know if this matters, but I am pregnant." And I said, "Oh my gosh, of course it doesn't matter. Me in my young 20s, it
Mhm.
won't matter at all." So I go back to talk to the commissioner. I'm like, "Oh, she's interested. This is going to be great. And she's pregnant." And he said, "Oh, well, I guess that means she won't want the job." And again, I didn't know much about much, but I said, "Oh, no, no, wait, what?" And I did a
Yeah.
sort of a timeout to someone who was many, many decades my senior, and just took the opportunity to say, "No, I don't think that's where she was coming from at all. I think she will be able to lead this division whether she has children or not, and she will be the one to make those decisions." So there were a couple instances like that where there were some just old mindsets, that there were some barriers that still played very interestingly into the work world, and yet we just address them with grace and with just actually that's not how it is anymore. She'll do great.
Sure.
And I've thought about that a lot, because for women, another challenge is, if you want to have a family, if you want to raise children, you are going to be doing a balancing act. And that is something, as I mentioned, I witnessed my mom do. It is something I've had to do. But again, you make sure that you have a support system, and then you just get comfortable. In my job, bringing my daughter and son to work, which I would do. They got very familiar with the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Honolulu. they'd come in on weekends, and they knew where all the candy jars were and their aunties and uncles. So that was something that my mom had done. I went to my mom's office a lot because sometimes that's just how it had to go. And so my kids have become very familiar with my job, and it's something that's a part of who I am. It doesn't make me less of a more avid litigator when I'm in court or prosecutor when I'm involved in a case, but it's certainly something that I've had to balance. And I balance it by making sure that it's a part of my professional life. With my daughter, I brought her, she was little, and I had a sentencing, and I didn't have anyone to hand her off to. So I handed her off to one of the other chambers, and I came back from court, and another judge was, playing with her. And it was kind of fun because, this is my reality, and we're just gonna to make to make do with it. So those will be challenges that women will face, but I think they make us very much consider all the different issues that are at stake when we're making decisions. A really important thing I think about life is it doesn't just happen. It's a series of decisions you make. It's a process of learning how to make decisions, and it's a process of building a team to help you make decisions. People you've worked with, people who you respect. And as you make those decisions and the reasons you make those decisions, sometimes they'll be based on family matters, like they were for me when I decided to leave the US Attorney's Office and go into the private sector for a period. You still build upon those decisions. And even if sometimes you make a decision and you realize, no, that's not exactly the direction I want to go, you have the ability and the wherewithal to shift. And that's also how you're going to find mentorship too. Some people think, oh,
Yeah.
I wish I could find a mentor. I wish there was that one person who could show me what to do and help me figure things out. And there's no Obi-Wan Kenobi for you, or there's no one person who's going to be that, but it is somebody that you will seek out, and it'll be somebody in all the different parts of your life that'll come to the fore. And that kind of builds sort of a group of mentors and a group of people as you move through the different phases of your life that you can call on to help you to make decisions as you move forward. So those are some. There's a whole lot more we could talk about on those issues. I'm happy to get back to some of them, but
Yeah. But I think also, a lot of girls, there's probably going to be like a new generation of, people who will follow in your footsteps, and then, follow in, the next generation, and, generations and generations to come. But I think something that I also want to get on is, what do you see, and also what do you hope to see as the future of law for women in the future?
that's a great question. I think what the law can teach people about how to be leaders is very powerful. And I'd like to see more women in the courtroom. I think there are a lot of women in the courtroom. There's a lot of active litigation. As I went through being a trial attorney before I took this job. So I graduated from law school. I joined the Department of Justice Honors Program, and I was in court a lot. And there are a lot of female prosecutors, so there were a lot of us in court. Um, then I left to go to the private sector, and I was still a trial attorney, so I was still a litigator, and I was a plaintiff's attorney, which sort of narrows it down a little bit. And there were fewer women who were at the level of litigation that I saw a lot of men were. And I would like to see more women being able to go out there and to feel comfortable and supported in having their own law firms or being their own attorneys, even in the private sector. I think that's something we can definitely do more with, especially because the private sector is where sometimes it becomes very difficult to be a mom and an attorney. And there's got to be a way to work through that. So there's been a lot that we have done. And one of the upshots of COVID, I think, is going to be this ability for teleworking and remote working to become more accepted as a way for people to participate. So anyone who's had a kid, playing at their feet while they've been engaged in some kind of meeting knows it doesn't keep you from being able to contribute. Obviously, if you're in court, that can't be the case, or if you're at a board meeting or something like that, that can't be the case. But the ability to balance and the ability to trust that women understand it, and that men too, because now we're going to have
Mhm.
many, many more men helping to balance that, uh, has to start at the top. So we need to have institutions and businesses give that kind of credit and that kind of trust to people as they're working things out. The other thing I really encourage women and men to do is to find support, to always be thinking about this, and to go to seminars or go to public events or read books or see what other people have done, because as it turns out, we're not the first ever to have seen these situations or been confronted by these kinds of challenges. And it's really interesting throughout history to see how some people um, and increasingly now more people are dealing with these challenges, and women in particular.
Oh, okay. Because I think, for as far as like, I have these discussions with some of our members in our club and within our organization, and we're always talking about ways that we can kind of support one another, because I think that's what's most important. We definitely bring different ideas to the table, which is an idea that and a concept that we should also start picking up on, because I think that's also a really important aspect of women, especially women in leadership, because they bring totally different things to the table, and I think that that's something also really interesting and important as far as being a girl and a woman in power and in these different positions in any field. So I think it's important, with your message, and just hearing, having these kind of like dialogue and conversations are also, I think, really important. um but I think also something really important to think about is like the challenges. So I kind of wanted to ask, what are the biggest challenges that you face in your personal career, and kind of how did you overcome it?
Right. So that is really something. I think it's learning how to deal with challenges and learning how to have people sometimes put you down or challenge you. I think as women, sometimes we tend to take that personally, say, "Oh my gosh, that person just said this about me or did this and or undercut me here or challenged me in this way," and we tend to take it personally. And that's, I think, a constant uh, refrain in my professional life, is to say this isn't personal. I mean, a lot of things are personal, and politics is personal. A lot of things are personal, but on the other hand, if you can say it's not personal, this is this person in whatever way they come to the table, expressing themselves, saying something or doing something, and it's not so much how I feel, but it's how I react. And the ability to kind of rise up and say, well, I'm going to still continue to push the issue, or I'm going to reframe based on that feedback, as opposed to that put down, but that feedback, and try to figure out how to continue to move forward and not take things personally, not cower in a corner, not say,
Right.
oh, well, I guess I won't try that again. So it's a little bit of the resiliency, which I know Punahou does a great job working
Mhm.
with its students on, but it's also just learning what that feels like, because it hurts. There will be times where somebody will say something or do something or disagree with you, and it really makes you feel icky. But you got to learn how to just step above that and just say, all right, we're all in this together. That person's not a bad person. I don't
Mhm.
agree with him or her, but I think we got to figure out how to move that forward. And that's a constant challenge. I think there's also something to be said to know your place and to really appreciate it. So in some cases, as you're working through your early professional career, you might be an intern somewhere, you then might move and you might be an assistant somewhere, and your place might not be 100% in the conversation, but you're there and you're witnessing and you're listening. Listening and learning is really important. But then when your time comes to be the one who is actively moving forward, step into it and recognize that you are now in a place, as a litigator, as a trial attorney. That was pretty easy, because all of a sudden there you are, the one who's handling the prosecution, and you're the one who's saying, "Good morning, Clare Connors on behalf of the United States," and you're moving your case forward. But that's not always so clear, right? It's not always so clear when suddenly, no, I'm not just listening and learning, I'm actively contributing now. And you meet the challenge of the role, and you meet the challenge of the moment. So those are really important things, I think, to keep in mind.
Yeah, and because law is like a male dominated field as of, right now, what sort of changes do you think need to be made in order to integrate those kind of concepts of like like a positive outlook and, grit and resilience?
Well, I think two things. I think one, what you've done in this organization, and what I think a lot of other people too have done, is calling attention to it, right, and making
Mhm.
sure that it's a piece of the conversation, making sure that we're always engaged in a analysis of whether or not we can be doing better. And the second part is also what you said, and what sounds like you're doing, is to build support networks amongst women. before I was an attorney even, but I was with the city of New York, I knew who all my fellow counterparts, women counterparts were, and we were a support network for each other. And we made sure that we were able to promote each other and that we were able to be sure that our role didn't get minimized and that our role was effectively and properly taken into account. And the same thing happened when I was a litigator with the Department of Justice in DC. A group of women, we all knew who we were, and we all made sure that we supported each other and that we were a part of not just recognizing that there were more women in the law and that there are going to be, and there are, I think, more women graduating from law school,
Mhm.
but that we had to effectively support each other so that when that point where it seems a lot of women drop out of the law when they're raising families or trying to accommodate a different lifestyle, that we had each other's backs, that we could help with daycare, that we could help with all the nit grit, right? Because there's just the
Yeah.
daily agendizing that you have to
Mhm.
do and the planning that you have to do, and then there's the large how we think about it. So doing both of those at once is important. Like, can I call a friend and say, hey, is your babysitter available? Mine, couldn't
Mhm.
show up.
Right.
Those kinds of actual concrete steps are really important. And again, they're not just women these days, they're men as well who are helping to kind of build these networks. But it's life happens, in the arena, in the moment, with all these different examples of how we need to handle things now. And it's not always clean, it's not always pretty, but there needs to be a lot more recognition that those kind of support systems are what's going to let more women
Mhm.
succeed in the law.
And, I also feel like the term gender equality has definitely evolved over time. What it is right now is definitely different from what it was back then. And, before women didn't even have the opportunity. But right now it's like a matter of these kind of like preconceived notions that people have and, these stereotypes that people have. So it's like the problems that we face in regards to gender equality is also shifting. So how do we view gender equality as of now? And then what do you also see it becoming in the future?
That's a great question. And it's a really good question because, and you may know this, but this year is the year we celebrate 100 years of women voting. And that's the Susan B. Anthony
Right.
19th Amendment. And I know there's been a lot of great attention drawn to that, but it's kind of a scary thought that it was only 100 years ago where there was no equality, where you were not valued at all. And to learn from the lessons of those who said, we're going to embrace this conversation, we're going to figure out, and they didn't always agree. In the suffragette movement, there were a lot of different platforms, there were a lot of different ways. So again, we can talk about broad strokes. Let's get the right to vote made very clear in the Constitution, but then what that means in terms of all the meetings, all the agendas that have to get set, all the writings and the discourse that has to happen, you need to really put some energy to that. So I think it's something where we've come a long way, but and I've been very blessed to be in a position where I've been valued for what I bring to the table. But I'm only the second female attorney general in the state of Hawaii, and that's kind of a sobering fact. So we can look and say, well, we've made a lot of progress, but why am I the only second? And there are 56 attorneys general in our whole country, and only 9 of us are women.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a problem, right? So it might seem in my own life that um, this was a great job for me, and it came to a point where I had done the right things and had a lot to bring to the table. But it can't be the case that there's only 9 of us across the country that bring that same kind of combination of litigation experience and background to the table. So it's important for those of us who are in those positions as attorneys general to recognize that and to see what those barriers are to leadership on that level. Because until we see more women lawyers in leadership positions, I think it will be a challenge. But that's the other reason why VP-elect Kamala Harris has really just charged through so many
Right.
um, barriers in that regard, because it's really wonderful for somebody to see that, yeah, she can run a
Mhm.
number of different divisions at the county level, at the state level, and now she'll be playing a real operative role in running our country.
Right.
So we need to have the conversation when the statistics tell us that we're not there yet, like the statistics tell us. But then we
Mhm.
need to make those decisions in our own life and recognize that if we have to figure out how to get something moved, we need to build a network, we need to strategize, and we need to move forward on a platform.
Mhm.
We have a mission to do
Right.
that.
And even I definitely remember one of her quotes that really stood out to me from Kamala Harris was that she is the first, but she doesn't want to be the last. So I think that was something that I really took away from her speech, and that was like something that hopefully we can also have, and that have that concept built in our minds, and hopefully we can build a better world for people that come after us. So I think that's also really important.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. That is really important. And those of us who actually can see the full landscape, so now we know what it takes. We
Right.
know what we did, and I learned a lot, mostly from men, because those were mostly the people who were ahead of me. But I would love to hear about how they made decisions and how
Right.
they got to certain places. And so you want to always be having that active conversation, even just within your own life.
Mhm. And so you kind of like to, I guess, to follow up with that whole like conversation about leadership. How do you think COVID-19 has impacted your leadership and your decisions, and what kind of decisions have you made in order to kind of help others as well, kind of like during this time?
Right. Well, COVID-19, I think on balance, it's obviously a tragedy because we're losing lives
Mhm.
right and center across the nation right now. But there will be things that evolve from COVID-19. In moments of tragedy and moments of challenge like this, you see a number of people rise up, and you do see people who come to the foreground and say, I am going to help in ways I didn't think I could help. I'm going to be a part of the boots on the ground, moving the state forward. And it's been wonderful to be in the position I'm in now, to see attorneys in my office, to see leadership just evolving in this moment in ways that wouldn't have been the case if we weren't confronted with a statewide and nationwide and worldwide crisis like
Right.
COVID. So that's been wonderful to see in its own way, despite the overlay of this national tragedy that we're witnessing. But it is true that as an attorney and in this position as being the chief legal advisor for the state, we've had a very unique role to play. We've been framing
Yeah.
the conversation the whole way forward, right? You hear about, oh, the governor's issued another proclamation, the
Right.
mayor's issued. Those are all legal documents. And those are all documents that represent some very deep thinking about what we want our state to be like and to do with each other, but also from the government onwards during a crisis like this. And it's been wonderful to have the opportunity in COVID to really build upon this expertise. So attorneys in my office have spent a lot of time looking at the Constitution, has spent a lot of time looking at what it's like when we restrict people's rights for a greater public health good, right? Where is that balance? And so these are conversations that I think have a lot of import for a lot of questions about what's the proper role of government, but even more so now, because we're asking people to stay home. We're asking people not to do things. We're asking people to think about this uh, disease as something, a silent killer, right? That you can't see it, you can't really fight it in the way you would fight another enemy. But we're asking a lot of people. So the role that we've been able to play in dealing with the fear by creating some clarity, by saying, you know what, this might all be really new. There might be a lot of uncertainty, but there are certain legal principles that have guided our country through a lot of challenging periods. And we're going to drill down on them. We're going to do the work, and we're going to make that part clear for the people of our state and the people of our country. And that's been a very empowering part of this, because it's we're boots on the ground. We're also trying to execute on a lot of policies during COVID. Government is essential, so we have to stay in operation. So we're figuring out how to do safe practices. We're figuring out how to keep our employees motivated and able to come to work when we have budget shortfalls. I mean, that's really hard. There's going to be a lot of financial impact. There's already been a tremendous amount throughout the state, but even within our state government, we're going to see a lot of that. So we have to find ways to make people continue to want to be a part of this mission, because it's a really
Mhm.
important mission that the state is responsible for, but to also understand that everyone's really afraid now, and this uncertainty is something we have to recognize, but do what we can to tell people in as many ways as we can that we've got certain aspects of this and we've got them.
Right. And so what I'm hearing is that, on the surface, the pandemic has definitely brought struggles and difficulties, but also like beneath the surface, there have been also like different positive aspects in ways that, giving us opportunities that we wouldn't have without it. And I think that's what's important, even for like just my whole like club that I've been making, and just having these conversations. Like I wouldn't be able to have these conversations without this knowledge of online meetings, and being able to have these different platforms to meet with people. And even some of the speakers that we've had like are in New York or in California, which are like super interesting. And it's like a something that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for this pandemic. So it's also something that we can be grateful for, and something that we don't have to always take so negatively. So I feel like your message of having a positive outlook, not only in going into leadership, but also right now with COVID and what's going on. So
Yeah,
I
no,
can
that's
kind of
we've been able to connect in ways that we couldn't
yeah.
before. I've been able to go to reunions and to attend meetings that
Mhm.
I would never have been able to attend because I wouldn't have been able to travel there. So that's
Right,
very
yeah.
neat.
hmm And like what I'm hearing also, like you're having different conversations that you wouldn't have had if it wasn't for the pandemic. And I think that having different conversations is also really important, similar to like the one we're having right now.
Right, right. And just one more thing on the
Yeah.
teleworking or the ability to remote in, that's going to be great because there has been a lot of push for more flexibility, giving especially attorneys, professionals, the ability to decide work life because they're going to get that brief filed, they're going to appear in court, they're going to get their work done, hopefully to the best of their ability, and that's what they should be measured on. But this has forced us to really institute teleworking and remote options. I don't want them to lose what you get from being in an office. So there's going to be a balance because some of what you learn from your office mates who are years ahead of you is just what comes from the lunchtime conversations or from watching how people might interact with a client. So a lot of that is really important. So we got to figure a way that as we are in this environment and we try to then come to a place eventually where it's balanced, that we allow our younger attorneys in particular to benefit from so many of the experiences that you only get from interacting physically with your clients and with your peers and your fellow coworkers.
Yeah. And I think, because of, all of this, like the really rapid technological growth of our world, and there's so much new things coming out. And obviously, with new technology, there will probably be new job opportunities in the future. So, I guess another question that I have is like, how can girls our age prepare for not only leadership roles in the future, but roles that we don't have right now, but we will have in the future that we aren't thinking about right now?
That's a great question. So one of the things that I did and that I think is how I got to this place, even though I didn't ever know I wanted to be the attorney general until 2 years ago
Mhm.
when I got asked to be the attorney general, is you want to say yes to as many different experiences and opportunities as you possibly can, because that's where the diversity is going to provide you a wonderful platform to move forward, even as things change or even as things are going to be very different in the future. So, taking the opportunity to try different types of study when you move into the college realm, or to try different types of internships or externships, to constantly be asking what else is out there and to be saying yes to invitations to participate in whether they're coursework or jobs or just a lot of extracurricular activities. That's going to give you sort of the diversity of experience and the breadth to kind of have your pulse on your finger on the pulse of how
Yeah.
things are changing and where things might be going, and to have that kind of breadth of experience to be able to adapt. So you might know you want to be a doctor, like out of the gates, off to college and right to med school, and that's wonderful. But you also want to be somebody who has thought about what being a doctor is like, because what is the world going to be like?
Mhm.
What are your patients, your clients, the people you're servicing going to be like, and what are their needs going to be? So to the extent that you can keep sort of the humanity perspective and
Yeah.
try out a lot of different things, no matter if you know what your passion is and where you want to go, I think that'll be really excuse me, really helpful to anybody as they try to figure out how to plan for a world that is
Right.
probably going to be very different.
Yeah, and hopefully, some of the members and our viewers, while listening to our podcast, we also try to give exposure to different that people might be interested in. That's kind of one of our main missions, is because there's so many different fields, and so many girls our age still don't know what they want to do in the future. So hopefully, being able to listen to our conversations with different leaders of different fields, they'll be able to kind of get an idea of what they might be interested in, what they might not be interested in, and so another one of our missions is, to also kind of foster passions within girls, so that they know really truly what they want to do in the future, and through their passion they can kind of create change in our world, and through that, like, grit and perseverance they get from their love for a certain field. So something that we always kind of ask in these podcasts is how you found your passion, whether it was from a person or an experience, how you were, because you might not have known exactly that you would be where you are right now. And you mentioned that earlier. So we kind of want to know, maybe who inspired you, what inspired you, and, things like that.
Right, right. No, that's a great question. And I guess as I think about it, one of the neat things about the law is it allows you to do a lot of different things. So when you're a lawyer, your clients in your cases are going to be really different, and you're going to have to be sort of someone who can get specialized in certain areas very quickly, even though you might not have studied that particular subject, or you might not have drilled down on it in any kind of academic way. So in that sense, again, it was the ability to find a profession that allowed me to stay diverse and allowed me to keep interested, and also to serve the public. And that, I think, is what the passion reduces to, is to feel like you're part of a mission, to feel like you're making at least one person's life better. And that starts at Punahou, right? That's what we were taught at Punahou, is to get involved in community service, to get involved in all these different types of ways of making your community better, because that's how you'll find out what gives you that sense of, I'm here for a reason, I'm here for a
Mhm.
purpose, and I can make a difference. And so, again, that is sort of the broad framework that you want to live your life, because a lot of these different things, the substance of it might change, but if you can say and get to recognize that, say, I'm going to like going to work every day because I'm going to be helping people, or I'm going to be part of a mission, or I'm going to be fighting for justice, or I'm going to be fighting for this type of cause or these types of laws or whatever it is. You'll get to recognize that as you move forward. So part of it is getting familiar with uh, many things. As you get older will become less familiar because you'll have experienced more things, right? So you want to at least be always aware of what makes you feel fulfilled, what makes you feel a part of a mission, and then take note of that, right? Be someone who says, that worked, that didn't work. So
Mhm.
again, if your passion is being a doctor, your passion is helping people in low income housing situations find homes, that will all be something that you can fit into a larger framework about your whole life, because it'll be a mission oriented life. It'll be something that you will know because you can feel it. And that's, and I didn't have it out of the box. I was very circuitous in how I came to where I am now. I left college and wasn't planning on becoming a lawyer, wasn't planning on necessarily doing any of the things that I'm doing now, but
Mhm.
knew that I appreciated service, knew that I appreciated um, working with people who were committed to service. And that's going to be really important. You can have a most profound commitment to a passion, but if the people you're working with are not people you respect and they don't respect you, that's not a place for you to be. That's not a place for you to be pursuing your passion, or circumstance to keep on. So those personal aspects, how you feel about something, and that's not always evident, right? We have to train our intuition to help us out. It's not as though we know from day one what our intuition or na'au is going to tell us is good or bad. Those are all things we learn. And so no matter what passion fits in, and for me, it was just being in places where I was with people who were committed to a mission, and we had to work under sometimes incredibly difficult circumstances. But in the end, what we were able to achieve was something we felt proud of. And whether that's a court case that you take in a really troubling matter where there were terrible things that happened to victims, or whether it's another type of litigation where your victims have really looked to you to heal them, that's the kind of framework you want to build for yourself.
And I also know that you mentioned how law can kind of overlap and, intertwine with a lot of areas. And I also know that you also did some teaching, in entrepreneurship classes and things like that. So, although maybe not everyone may be interested in the field of law, how do you think it can kind of intertwine with other areas that people might be interested in and can keep in mind about.
Right. Teaching is something you always can do and you always should do. So any opportunity that you have to help somebody or to be a part of teaching a next generation of your profession is something you should take the opportunity and
Right.
do. So that's in particular as lawyers, we learn on the job. So we go to 3 years of school so that we can understand the laws, think about how to write legal essays and publications and all that. But at the end of the day, we learn from the people who are older than us who've been in the court, who we learn from the judges who tell us, nice try, Miss Connors, ask that question again, you didn't get it right.
Mm.
And that's how we learn. And that's why teaching is such an important, it's not just happening in the university, it's happening every day on the job. And that's again that mentorship. We are, and I have been mentored, and I have a responsibility to mentor in turn. And so being able to work officially with the University of Hawaii, the law school, was wonderful. And I had a great collaborative relationship with another wonderful attorney in town and helped people with ideas build their business practices and do a lot of things that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do for financial reasons, and then to teach students how to do that and to teach students how to interact with clients. So it's great to do it in an official way any chance you get, and sometimes that can be harder because you already have a full-time job, and then putting that on top of it, try to make the time if you can, but recognize that you're always teaching, no matter if you're in a formal environment or not. You're always teaching the ones that come after you, and you're always learning from the ones who have been ahead of you on this road. So that's an important thing. Even in what you're doing now, you're clearly looking to memorialize this so that those who come after you will be able to learn something too.
Mhm. Right. And also, right now at Punahou, I'm currently taking a class called Global Sustainability by Design. And so a big part of that is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So one of the assignments right now is picking one of those goals and kind of identifying the problem, the importance of solving it, and then also how is it being addressed and what are ways that we can solve it and by 2030. And so I chose goal number 5, which is gender inequality. And um, something that I do want to ask is, what are ways that we can kind of solve gender inequality by 2030?
Hmm. Right. And so, and that issue, especially when you're talking about sustainable environmental issues, right? Those gender equality issues are going to come in a lot of different shapes and forms. Like one of
Right.
them is making sure you have access to childcare, right? Making sure people have access to healthcare. Those are the things that we see keep women, for the most part, from being able to advance. If they can't send their children to safe places for schools, they won't be able to be in the workforce. And that's something we've seen in COVID, right? Last month, I think 80% of the people who dropped out of the workforce were women. So we're not going to get to a sustainable place if we can't address why it is that women are pulling out. And it comes down largely to healthcare. So that's been something that the state has worked on. Where early on, we realized that we needed to have safe practices in the child care centers, and that people needed to have a safe place for their children to be. So that's important. The other, as I said, is healthcare, right? If we don't have access to healthcare as women in particular for a whole lot of reasons, then that's going to be a barrier, right? We need to be able to choose how we move forward in life, and that's going to be an important part of that across the globe, because planning and being able to raise families in ways, just we see when we have good healthcare, when women have access to healthcare, they make better decisions. They're able to make better decisions about their own lives. So those are two really, really important things. And then also education too. That's going to be
Yeah.
incredibly important. The ability for, again, it all ties together, for women to be able to go to school, even if they have childcare issues, for them to be able to advance, for that not to be financially a barrier for them. Those are going to be really important things. And having these conversations about what it means to see these statistics, which are bad.
Right.
Statistics are bad, and how it is we're going to develop a platform. Like let's go find out what these women's stories are.
Mhm.
Let's go. I mean, life is a lot about storytelling, right? And we
Right.
learn from stories. So let's go actually dig into the data. And that's where you'll see a lot of different people collaborating. So you'll see lawyers in the public justice realm collaborating with data incubators and things like that, because that's where we find out where the issues actually are. And then if there's a lawsuit to be brought, if there's some kind of legislation to be brought, then we can actually figure out what those details should look like. But there's a lot of digging into the details that has to be done so that we can actually see what the problem is, because it can manifest itself differently during a pandemic, but also during economic downturns
Yeah,
or challenges too.
yeah, because it's really interesting, getting to hear your view on it. Because 2030 is really close if you think about it. It's a deadline that's pretty much gonna come really soon, and so we've had this conversation in class on how we can kind of combat this issue because the deadline is so near. And so it's really interesting to see your perspective, and then also some of the teachers, they coming from their background. One of my teachers is a product designer, and hearing her ideas about it. And my other teacher, she is a mechanical engineer. So hearing these different perspectives and how they kind of view what we need to do in order to solve this issue by 2030 has been really interesting to hear, as a student, because I'm hearing all these different ideas that all sound like things that we need to do, and none are more important than the other, but something that we all need to focus on individually and equally. So it's really cool getting to have these conversations with different people, and learning about ways that people my age can help. So I think that's something that's really cool. Yeah.
And the key is you want it to be sustainable, because I think we've seen record numbers of women come into the
Mhm.
workforce, and one pandemic set us back decades, right? So how do
Right.
we make it sustainable? And that's really got to be
Mhm.
a focus of the inquiry.
Right. And having all this research, there's so much statistics that I read about, through this project that we have in our class, and it's pretty surprising, but also not at the same time. So I feel like having these conversations, but also having other peers that not only think the same way as me, but also think differently, and having that conversation with even other peers is interesting and also very helpful and empowering, because um, people our age will end up making change in the future, and be the ones that need to solve the issue by 2030. So it's really cool to have dialogue with other people, and not only people of professionals, but also people our age, and getting to see their perspective on it.
Yes, no, that's very true. And just this weekend, I was on a call with a classmate of mine from Yale, who's now a Congress member, Congresswoman, and another classmate of ours who was a former congressman. And the conversation we were having was just like the conversations we were having in college about, but we had all advanced agendas by then, right? We had all done something and we had all learned something. So we weren't just speaking theoretically or from research or from things we'd read, but all of a sudden in our conversation, we were talking about our own experiences and saying, well, that was right or that was wrong. Or this is how we have to improve on this, or this is where we might not get traction. So why don't we try something else? So that conversation starting now, I can just tell you 30 years later, you'll still be having it.
Yeah, that's something great about these online platforms too, is we can just connect really easily from
Right.
different places. Yeah, that's something really good about the pandemic, I guess, something positive that it brought. But I think also we would like to get into some of the questions that our members sent in, and they would like to have asked in our. So the first one comes from Kat, and she is a freshman, and she wants to know, how would you most like to make a difference as Attorney General?
That is a great question. And one of the things I'd like to do is I'd like to inspire by example. So I'd like to not tell the people in this department how to do things, how to litigate cases, how to be better, but I want to show them how to do it.
Right.
So, and that's important. I don't want to be in a position where I can sit back and say, all right, I'm the attorney general, I can tell everybody what to do now. I would actually
Mhm.
be in there saying, this is how not only I would argue the case, but I'm going to argue it. And I want to be out there saying, this is how we're going to strategize in this particular trial, and I'll argue it. And so the credibility that I can give to it, because I'm here because I have the experience. I'm not here so that I can tell other people what to do. And that's important. You want to stay in the game. And hopefully by that kind of example, we can continue to do the kind of good work that we do, but even do it better, and that there can be a call to excellence, because I think that's an important part of what I'm doing as the Attorney General. Is I'm telling people that the state has a really important part to play in your life. And if you put good people in government, you will get good things back. And I want to be sure that people understand that government institutions have a lot to offer. And I want to show by example that we can and we
Yeah.
will do that.
Yeah, and I think also that kind of ties in with our next question is that, obviously, you're leading by example, and, um, you're leading by example to people like us, students like us. And so this question comes from Sonia, who's a freshman. So, you've had so many great moments, but have you ever made like a decision you regretted? And how did you resolve this?
Right. No, I think regret is an interesting word, and I don't
Mhm.
think we should ever live in regret. I don't think any decision we make should be termed bad. There might be decisions we make that we wouldn't make again, but
Right.
what we're doing is we're building a track record. In life, again, as I said, the decisions you make, you're building a track record. So as you make those decisions, you want to be able to say, I'm moving towards something. I might have taken a little bit of a detour, but it probably wasn't even a detour. It was probably just a different way to get to the same place. So I would never talk about the things. There've been times in court where I said something that, oh, I wish I hadn't said that. So that kind of
Right.
regret I definitely have. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, as a lawyer, everything you say is recorded forever. But in terms of decisions that I've made, and it's not always because I've thought through them. Sometimes I've really thought instinctively. But when I left the U.S. Attorney's Office, for example, I didn't have another job. I left because I had two little babies and I had a
Right.
lot of circumstances, and I was carrying a very heavy trial calendar. And I think some people would have said, oh, she's going to regret this. She's going to jump
Mhm.
off. She's going on the mommy track. This is going to be something she's going to regret. But I never thought of it like, oh, am I going to regret this? I say, well, let's see what I might feel like if I chose a different plan and how that might make me feel, but not regret. Because yes, I did leave that job, and it turned out to be a jumping off place for all the different things I've been able to do. So no, I haven't regretted any of the big decisions I've made. They haven't always turned out the way I thought they would. I
Right.
was nominated to be a federal judge and got very close, and then that didn't end up going the way of a confirmation, and I never regretted a moment of it. But it didn't work out quite the way I thought. But I'm happy doing what I'm doing now.
That's something that I think is a great message, because obviously your job comes with so much decision making and so much responsibility. So I think that having that kind of mindset is important not only in the field that you work in, but also any type of field that involves any decision making, and even just in our life when we try to kind of live our life and make decisions, we can think of them as no regrets. And I think that's a nice message to think about. And so the last student question is from Tate, and she's also a freshman, and she wants to know, what do you consider to be your greatest accomplishment as the current Attorney General of Hawaii?
Ah, greatest accomplishment. Well, let's see. I am 2 years in. I think we've had some really great wins in court. I think we've been able to draw some attention to our expertise as litigators, which is not always how we're recognized. And so we've had some really great wins in court that were the product of a lot of attention and detail. And I like to read any of the big briefs that we do. I like to comment on it. I like to argue them. And so I think one of the greatest accomplishments is just we've been doing really well litigating on behalf of the state in some big cases. But I do think that it's hard. There's so many things I do every day. It's been wonderful to play a role in the Susan B. Anthony project
Mhm.
and to be able to talk. I've talked to students at the Department of Ed, both the high school level and the junior school level, about the 19th Amendment. And that's been really wonderful to be a part of that teaching moment and that civics moment. So those have been really proud things that we've done. But at the end of the day, we litigate and we advise our clients, and to be able to do that well and with successful results has been a really proud moment, or set of
Yeah,
moments, I should say.
yeah. And I think a good question to kind of end everything is kind of like a call to action. Obviously you do so much service, public service, and that just goes hand in hand with your position. So, can you kind of comment on things that we can do, students my age can do for a community that will make a positive impact not only for the moment but also long term in the future?
Sure. And again, you want to get involved, right? You want to see something, say something, do something, right? So that's an important set of principles to live by. You're an active participant in this world. You're an active participant in this community, and you don't want to sit by passively as things get done or happen, right? So, and Punahou gives you those tools. So the community service, the ability to start your own club if there's an issue that you want to address, see something, say something, do something, and that is really an important part of how we should and can move forward together. So no challenge is too big if that's what we do, and if we do it together. So clubs are great. Working with other people is great. Being able to network and to draw together and be mission oriented is important. And Punahou will support you in all of those things. And you want to find a college that will support you in those things. And you want to find a working environment that will support. Again, if you're a doctor, you want to be a part of an institution that thinks about how the things you're doing affects other people, not just each patient, and a lawyer too. So that's what you want to do, and you want to do it being humble, being kind, not taking yourself too seriously. Always have a sense of humor about things, and especially in a place like Hawaii, you never want to burn a bridge. Even in high school, I'm working with a lot of people that I knew at Punahou, and I remember some of the things they did. Not all of them are good, so you want to know that we live in a small place, but that's where it starts: how we treat each other in our community, and how we work together to make our community better.
Well, I think that's a great message to end with, and something that we can think about after. And just we wanted to thank you so much for making time to come talk to us. Hopefully you'll be able to inspire, and I'm sure you'll be able to inspire a lot of the people that will listen to our conversation. And so, just to, if you could maybe leave us with any place that people can find you or reach you with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can be reached. You can go to the governor's website and you can find me. We have our own website, ag.hawaii.gov. So you can find out what we're doing, all the different things we're doing every day, and a lot of them, and reach out to us anytime at Hawaii AG, Hawaii AG at hawaii.gov. So.
Mhm. Well, yeah. So thank you again for joining us. That was, so grateful for. Yeah, I'm so grateful, and I got to learn so much just from our conversation, and I'm sure other people will definitely learn something and take away a few things from our conversation. So, yeah, thank you for making time for us.
Absolutely, anytime, Kylie. You guys are doing great, so keep it up. Happy to be a part of
Yeah,
this conversation.
thank you. Thank
Alrighty,
you.
take care.
Okay.
All right, aloha.
Thanks for tuning into our podcast, Where Do We Go? We hope that our guests inspired you as much as we were. Make sure to check out our website for more information about our organization, WeGo, as well as our Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify. We hope you have a great rest of your day and continue to lead and create positive change. This is Kylie, signing off. We'll see you next time.